Jim was in the middle of recording L.A. Woman when the engineer counted the 36th empty beer bottle and whispered, "This is impossible." What happened next left 4 people in that studio speechless and questioning everything they knew about the human body. December 18th, 1970, the Doors Workshop Studio, Los Angeles. The room was thick with smoke and the smell of spilled beer. Morrison had already laid down vocals for Riders on the Storm, The Changeling, and Been Down So Long That Day. Each take was flawless, each word perfectly timed. But Bruce Botnick, the album engineer, kept glancing at the growing pile of empty bottles. 36 beers in 8 hours. The math didn't work. A man Morrison's size should have been unconscious 3 hours ago. But what none of them knew was that Morrison's liver was already failing, processing alcohol at half the normal rate, flooding his bloodstream with toxins that should have killed him. In the control booth sat 23-year-old Danny Sugerman, the Doors' office assistant, watching his idol self-destruct. Danny had been battling his own heroin addiction for 2 years. He had less than 6 months clean. Watching Morrison that night, he felt his sobriety slipping. Danny's sister Carol had begged him not to go to the session. "Jim's voice saved you once," she whispered before he left, "but watching him die will kill you." Danny went anyway. It was Morrison's last album, his last chance to understand the darkness. If you want to know how this story ends and discover the truth behind Morrison's final recording sessions, subscribe to our channel. Every week we share untold stories about Jim Morrison and the Doors that changed rock history forever. Bruce Botnick had engineered albums for over a decade by December 1970. He had seen musicians drunk, high, and everything in between, but nothing prepared him for the L.A. Woman sessions. Morrison arrived at the Doors workshop at 2 in the afternoon, carrying 2 paper bags. Each bag held a 12-pack of Budweiser. 24 beers total. Morrison set them down near the vocal microphone and said, "Let's get started." The band had decided to record at their rehearsal space instead of a professional studio, wanting raw authenticity. Morrison had gained weight since the Miami trial, his leather pants replaced with jeans and a beard. This was his blues album, his return to the music he loved before fame. The first song was The Changeling. Morrison opened his first beer during the instrumental intro. By the final verse, the bottle was empty. He opened another and said, "Again." 17 takes that afternoon. Morrison drank steadily between each one, never slurring, never missing a word. By the 8th beer, most people would be stumbling. Morrison was singing better than ever. Medical science tells us that chronic alcoholics eventually reach a point where their damaged liver can't process alcohol efficiently anymore. Morrison had reached that point. His body wasn't handling 36 beers well. It was failing to process the alcohol at all. Toxins were accumulating in his blood, his brain, his organs. But here's the paradox that stunned Botnick. Morrison's vocal performance was flawless. His pitch was perfect. His timing impeccable. His emotional delivery, perhaps the best of his career. Have you ever wondered how far the human body can be pushed before it breaks? Morrison was living proof that genius and self-destruction can coexist in the same bloodstream. An average 12-ounce beer contains about 14 grams of alcohol. 36 beers equals 504 grams, consumed over 8 hours. That's 63 grams per hour. The human liver processes approximately 7 to 10 grams per hour. Morrison was consuming alcohol 6 times faster than his liver could possibly handle. His blood alcohol should have been well above 40, the level where most people lose consciousness and risk death. Yet Morrison wasn't just conscious, he was performing at a virtuoso level. Ray Manzarek noticed Morrison's hands shaking between takes, not during performances, but when he thought no one was watching. He would pick up a beer bottle and his fingers would tremble. Manzarek had seen that tremor in his uncle who died of cirrhosis at 51. Morrison wasn't drinking 36 beers to get drunk anymore. He was drinking to feel normal, to stop the shaking, to quiet the withdrawal symptoms that started every morning. The LA Woman sessions spanned December 1970 and January 1971. Morrison's alcohol consumption remained consistently extreme. The band stopped commenting. What could they say? Morrison was 27 and drinking himself to death, and they were powerless to stop him. So they kept recording, documenting his voice while they still could, knowing this would be their last album together. Morrison's lyrics for LA Woman are filled with endings and departures. Riders on the Storm talks about a killer on the road. The Wasp is about death and transformation. The title track is Morrison's farewell to Los Angeles, the city that made him famous and miserable. He sings about Mr. Mojo Risen, an anagram of his own name, as if already viewing himself as a ghost. When Botnick listened to these lyrics, he realized what he was recording. This wasn't just an album. This was Morrison's suicide note written in blues progressions. The only hint came on the final day of recording, January 18, 1971. They had just finished the last overdubs on Riders on the Storm. Morrison listened to the playback, nodded, and said, "That's it. We're done." Then he looked at Botnick and added, "Thanks for keeping the tape rolling, Bruce. This one's going to outlive all of us." Could this album have saved Morrison if he had listened to his own words? What do you think? Robbie Krieger admitted in his 2009 memoir that the sessions were devastating. We knew Jim was killing himself. We could see it in real time. But what could we do? He was an adult. Part of me was just grateful he showed up and could still sing. John Densmore wanted to cancel the sessions, force Morrison into rehab. But Manzarek and Krieger argued that music was the only thing keeping Morrison tethered to life. So Densmore played angry, attacking his drums like he was fighting death itself. Manzarek counted the bottles, not out of judgment, but documentation. He knew one day Morrison would be gone, and people would ask questions. 36 beers on December 18th, 29 beers and half a bottle of whiskey on December 22nd, 41 beers on January 7th. He never confronted Morrison. He just watched, counted, and mourned. In March 1971, Morrison weighed 205 pounds. He had been 145 pounds in 1967. That 60-pound gain wasn't just bloating. Morrison's body was retaining fluid because his liver was failing. His face was puffy, his abdomen distended, his legs swollen. Classic signs of cirrhosis. He slept 12 to 14 hours a day and still woke exhausted. He had night sweats, lost appetite, and his skin had a yellowish tinge. But Morrison refused to see a doctor. He told Pamela he didn't want to know how bad it was. The alcohol affected Morrison's mental state beyond intoxication. He experienced confusion, disorientation, vivid hallucinations. These symptoms are consistent with hepatic encephalopathy, where liver failure allows toxins to affect brain function. Morrison was being poisoned by his own body. Yet during the sessions, he maintained enough control to deliver his finest vocal performances. The disconnection between his physical deterioration and artistic excellence was almost supernatural. LA Woman was released on April 19, 1971, 2.5 months before Morrison died in Paris. The album received strong reviews and climbed to number 9 on the Billboard charts. Critics praised Morrison's return to form. Rolling Stone called it the Doors' best album since their debut. But if you listen knowing what happened during those sessions, every song becomes a confession. Been Down So Long is Morrison describing his exhaustion with addiction. Cars Hiss By My Window is Morrison alone at 4 a.m, watching empty Los Angeles streets. And Riders on the Storm, the closing track, is perhaps Morrison's greatest vocal achievement. 7 minutes of atmospheric dread, Morrison's voice drifting like a ghost, already haunting his own song. The lyrics warn about a killer on the road, but also offer advice. Take a long holiday. Let your children play. Was Morrison singing to himself? His subconscious begging him to stop, to choose life? The song fades with rain and thunder, then silence. The album ends. Morrison leaves. On March 11, 1971, less than 2 months after completing L.A. Woman, Morrison flew to Paris with Pamela. He told the band he needed a break to work on poetry. The last time the Doors were together was March 10th, listening to final mixes. Morrison was drinking, but not excessively by his standards. Maybe 10 or 12 beers. He seemed calm, almost peaceful. When the meeting ended, Morrison hugged Manzarek and said, "I'll see you guys when I get back." Those were his last words to them. He never came back. In Paris, Morrison's drinking decreased initially. He was excited by the city's anonymity. He and Pamela walked along the Seine, visited museums. Morrison filled notebooks with poetry. Friends who visited in April said he seemed happier than he'd been in years. But the physical damage was done. His liver was failing, his heart weakened, his system on the verge of collapse. On July 3, 1971, Pamela found Jim Morrison dead in their Paris bathtub. The official cause was heart failure. No autopsy was performed. Morrison was buried quietly in Père Lachaise Cemetery 3 days later. He was 27 years old. The lack of autopsy fueled decades of speculation, but the most likely explanation is that his body simply gave out after years of alcohol abuse. His liver failed. His heart stopped. Bruce Botnick learned of Morrison's death from Elektra records. His first thought was of those December sessions, the 36 beers, Morrison's trembling hands, and perfect voice. "I wasn't surprised," Botnick said years later. "I was heartbroken, but not surprised. Jim had been dying the whole time I knew him." The L.A. Woman album took on new meaning after Morrison's death. It wasn't just a great rock record, it was a relic, the last words of a doomed poet. Riders on the Storm played constantly on rock radio that summer, Morrison's voice haunting the airwaves. The album eventually went double platinum, becoming the Doors' best-selling album. Morrison's ability to function at a high artistic level, despite consuming impossible amounts of alcohol, remains one of rock's most troubling mysteries. It speaks to both the heights of human talent and depths of human self-destruction. For those in that room during those sessions, who counted the bottles and watched Morrison deteriorate, the album is triumph and tragedy inseparable. Today, when young musicians romanticize the troubled artist myth, industry veterans point to Morrison as a cautionary tale. There was nothing romantic about watching a 27-year-old drink himself to death. Nothing poetic about trembling hands, yellowing skin, or a brilliant mind clouded with toxins. The music was beautiful. The process was horrific. On a December afternoon in 1970, Jim Morrison walked into a studio, drank 36 beers, and sang like an angel. Bruce Botnick captured it all. And now, more than 50 years later, we can still hear that voice, still feel that power, still wonder at the impossible thing we're witnessing. A man dying and singing at the same time, an artist at his peak and his nadir. Jim Morrison, forever 27, forever singing Riders on the Storm.